Hello there, Atheist Junior here, your friend and humble narrator, and I'm joined by one of the smartest people I know, Jackson Wheat. And Jackson, we have a long history. We have done several streams, and we hung out at Faithless Forum, which was cool. We got to hang out with Erica, Gutsick Gibbon, R and Raw, Holy Kool-Aid, lots of cool atheist YouTubers. That was awesome. So I am getting ready for another debate with Ken Hovind. I'm going to send you a link. I don't know if you've seen my last debate with Kent, but it was all about embryology and Haeckel. And I really think it was the best debate I've had because Kent was just, I pretty much laid out all of his arguments in my intro and just kind of knocked them out one by one. So it kind of took the knees out from under him. And the big thing that was funny was that I was especially calling him out for saying that Haeckel was put on trial. And Kent, he had one of the greatest quotes I've heard Kent say. Something, it was like, I don't have any evidence. I didn't ever look for any, something like that of the trial. Like just openly admitting that he just believes this because he read it and has no evidence of it. And that was pretty funny.
That's par for the course for Kent.
So that debate, I really took it really seriously, and I didn't, I didn't let Kent go off topic and stuff. But this debate, I think, is more of a victory lap for me, because it's whale evolution. So Kent's going to end up talking about whale genitalia at some point. So this is my more. I want my science and information to be well versed, but I'm going to be, it's going to be more fun, I think. But yeah, so why don't you just go over some of the things that you were saying just a second ago?
Okay. So you mentioned that you were going to be having this debate. And I don't have the link to it, but if you could shoot me that at some point, it'd be great. And it's been a while since I've looked at any whale stuff, because the last time I looked at any whale data was when we did the hippo's tail over on my channel for the ancestor's tail. And then, of course, the most watched video on my channel is, of course, the whale sex video. So, so I made like a series of notes indicating the evidence that like whales are absolutely conclusively like artiodactyls, the even hoof mammals, and I also made a little PowerPoint so that you have visual references to go along with all the stuff that is brought up in the notes. Because if I just mention something like, oh, the petrosal bone is shared between like hippos and whales, like, whoa, what the heck is a petrosal bone? What does that mean? So like here you have the picture. You can go, okay, well, here it has this particular hyperinflated region in whales and also in early whales and also hippos. So you can show that those similarities exist. So like, how do we know that how do we know that whales are definitely even hoof mammals that became aquatic? Well, funny enough, actually, I believe it was was it Haeckel? It was either Haeckel or Huxley. One of them made a phylogenetic tree way back in like the 1860s or 70s, and they had whales right next to the artiodactyls, so all the other even hoof mammals, and that was kind of the first time that was at least the earliest evidence I've seen for researchers thinking that whales and artiodactyls are related. And then years later, you had like the when you had the mesonychids, which were this group of carnivorous hooved mammals that are like just outside of the artiodactyls. It seemed like those were the ancestors of whales. And there was a bit of a kerfuffle over that, which has all been totally smoothed out. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. So first, even before we had genetics, there were these things called like immune reactive tests. And I kind of flipped it a little bit. So I went back and I looked at my stuff. Basically what you do is you take a protein, like from humans, like you could take albumin, for instance, and you can inject it into another animal, like say a rabbit, and the rabbit will produce antibodies to that. And then you can apply those into other animals that you think, or plants or whatever, that you think are related. It would be animals, of course, to the thing in question. And the antibodies that they make, or sorry, the reaction they have, the strength of the reaction is kind of a proxy for relatedness. So when you're doing this reactive test, so if you're putting like human albumin in a rabbit, then it generates the antibodies, and then you are testing those antibodies against like chimps, gorillas, orangutans, monkeys. Of course, it's going to be strongest in chimps and gorillas, and then a little bit weaker for orangutans and a bit weaker for monkeys, and that's a proxy for their actual genetic relatedness. So that was one way. So that was done kind of early on, and then before we had actual genetic tests, we had like you could compare amino acids. So gamma fibrinogen was one protein that was used for that test, and it showed, surprise, surprise, whales are most similar to artiodactyls. There was a bit of a question early on, like certain genes showed that hippos were more closely related to pigs, but as larger data sets came out, that totally fell by the wayside, and it turned out whales and hippos are sister groups. So here's a couple of examples. So I mentioned otoferlin, cadherin 23, and protocadherin 15. I put those in the PowerPoint. So those are three different phylogenies in which you can see that the whale in this instance is a dolphin, and it is sister to the cow, so it's definitely an artiodactyl. And then whales share unique genetic insertions with other artiodactyls. So like they share the most unique genetic insertions with hippos, again, because they're sister groups. So there are certain insertions in their genome, in both the genomes of whales and hippos, that are only shared with them and with nothing else. Let's see, what were the examples I gave? So like HIP 24, KM14, HIP 4, and AF. These insertions are, again, that's in the PowerPoint, shared uniquely with or between hippos and whales. And then you have a few other insertions that are shared exclusively between hippos, whales, and ruminants. So the mammals that chew a cud, like AAA 228, AAA 792, and GM5. And then there are some there are some genetic insertions that are shared by like almost all artiodactyls. So yeah. So again, you'd have to argue that like, wow, it's just a coincidence, I guess, that these specific insertions are shared between whales and all the other artiodactyls. That would be a very weird coincidence, I guess. Yeah, whales and hippos share a 32 base pair insertion in epidermis growth factor. That's another one. But furthermore, so one of the cool things that this kind of ties in with the whale embryology is that baleen whales, the mysticetes. So there's two modern whale clades. There's mysticetes, so the baleen whales, and the odontocetes, which are the toothed whales, the dolphins and sperm whales, things like that. Well, mysticetes don't have teeth. They have baleen, which is how they filter food, but the juveniles, or the fetuses, grow tooth buds that then get aborted and like reabsorbed into the gum. And what's interesting, of course, is that the enamel, or there are genes for enamel that are broken in all mysticetes, which is super weird. Like, why would these animals without teeth have broken tooth genes unless they had a common ancestor who had teeth? Right? I mean, that's pretty much the only logical conclusion, unless you want to argue that, I don't know, it either has like a secret job that nobody knows what it does, or I don't know, like it's just a coincidence, or it's the devil trying to which whales don't have a pelvic bone?
Thank you for the super chat, Marcina. Appreciate that.
Well, don't have a pelvic bone? I'm not entirely sure on that one.
I believe they. I think all modern whales we see that reduced hip bone, and this is Jackson. I love you like the Energizer Bunny. I love that, but I think your arguments for possible counter argument for Kent Hovind, I think you might be giving him a little bit too much credit because his arguments are much simpler than that.
Oh,
I think the ones that we're going to see. And this is really what the whole debate really hinges on, this topic. And it's really about the definition of the word vestigial, which is I wanted to get into.
okay, sure. I have notes for that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and if you don't mind later, I thought maybe we could, usually when me and you do a stream, we end up watching a Hovind video. So maybe we can do that a little bit later. It's always fun, because that's got his actual arguments in it. That because it's good in a debate. I like to, because Kent is so predictable. He's got a script. So my preparation always is, what are the arguments that I know he's going to make, so I can try and be prepared for them and not be sort of caught off guard. So Kent's argument is that evolutionists or scientists say that the whale's hip bones are vestigial, that they have no purpose, no function. And he's using a definition of vestigial that means a structure that has no function. It used to have a function in the ancestor, but now it no longer has any function. It's basically useless. But so he's saying it's not vestigial because, tell that to the whale when you're trying to mate. But I much prefer the definition of a different function. It could be a reduced function, no function, or just a different function, because any structure in the body is going to take up energy for the body to create the cells that make up that structure, even if it's reduced. So, the body's like an economy, because it's going to, over time, it's going to get rid of or reduce anything that's not essential or helping it adapt or live long enough to reproduce, basically. So I don't know if there's truly structures that are completely useless, even in humans. Like they have, they say the appendix is the site of like immune response.
Yeah, it's an inoculum for your digestive tract. Yeah.
Yeah.
The palmaris longus is one example in humans. It's a tendon in your wrist. Actually, like something like 25% of humans just don't have it at all.
Yeah. Also, emu are flightless birds, and they have like an arm that just is. They can't move it. They can't flap like other birds might. Like early dinosaur, early raptors couldn't fly, but might have flapped to get away, get uphill, or get a boost of speed to get away from a predator or something like that.
Even if you use that definition, which I personally think that's one of the weakest arguments that Hovind could possibly pick. That was never historically like the reason that anyone considered whales to be artiodactyls. It's such a ridiculously silly argument. But even if we use that definition, which personally, I don't really care what definition we use for the word vestigial, as long as we use it consistently, right? If you want to say it's reduced function, okay, fine. If you want to say it's vestigial only means it has no function, which okay. Either way, we can find vestigial structures like that, things that have no function in whales. The instance I mentioned earlier, teeth in baleen whales, they develop teeth. They develop the tooth buds that then subsequently stop growing and then get reabsorbed. Whether we're using the definition of reduced or functionless, that is functionless. They don't eat anything when they're in the womb, obviously. They never grow, and the teeth never grow large enough to be useful. The same for hind limb buds. These grow and then disappear.
Yeah, unless it's shown in an atavism like it is in some dolphins. But the embryo,
and even still, they can't use them.
One of the most fascinating, I think, arguments for cetacean evolution is that in dolphin embryos, we see two nostril grooves on the front, and those migrate to the top of the head and close into one hole, which becomes the blowhole. And to me, I think that's a perfect example of evo-devo, where it's mirroring the migration of that same nasal structure to the top of to the top of the head. And Ken Hovind has this ridiculous argument against it, which he's like, oh, wouldn't that sever the optic nerve of the whale? Like,
no,
as it's moving, like,
no, of course not, Nimrod. What? I like scroll down. If you scroll down in the PowerPoint,
okay.
You can literally see. Keep scrolling, keep scrolling, keep scrolling, keep scrolling, keep scrolling. Stop.
Oh, here we go.
Okay. Literally every position of the nasal bone, from the tip of the snout up to the middle, to the top of the head. The idea that the nasal bone would, you say, sever the optic nerve?
Yeah,
That's an insane claim to make.
He can only picture evolution. By the way, thank you, David. Thank you for the super chat. No, I'm not the IT director. Right now, the tech guy at DAL is this guy, Joseph, who's just a horrible person. He's a real, like, jerk. Me and him were arguing on emails. Anyway, so
like, has he ever looked at? Look at this. This is
he can't understand that evolution is about populations and that it's over a long period of time, which I know he knows that. So he can only imagine things changing in one organism in a fast, like, human lifespan. Like, that's the only, he has a very, like, limited thought process. If that wasn't already obvious.
Can I share screen? Is that a thing? Can I do that?
Yeah. I just wanted to show, like, that Jackson, like, last week, he wrote out all those notes for me. I just, like.
Okay. So can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. So you see this picture of a false killer whale here?
Yeah. Can I read this real quick? The super chat.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. From Rosina for $9.99. It says the appendix isn't vestigial because it has evolved and been lost over 39 times in mammals. So the function in humans is still the ancestral function. Well, thank you for the super chat, Rosina. I really appreciate that. Thank you, everybody who sent super chats. Okay. Go ahead.
If you look at this false killer whale here, the blowhole is here on the top of the head. The eyes are here on the sides of the head. How on earth could the optic nerve be severed when the blowhole is up here and the eyes are here? What is the optic nerve would be back here?
Yeah, I guess I didn't even think of it that way. So see, this is so funny because he can only imagine. He's thinking of it from a human perspective, like if our nostrils, if our nose bone or nostrils migrated, then you might cross that path. You might cross the path of an optic nerve, I guess. But whales have a completely different structure. Thank you. I'm so going to bring that up when I know he's going to make that argument.
Here. And like here's a picture right here. So like, what this, like the eyes are what, like, it's really hard to see in this picture. Is there a better one maybe?
So no, false killer whale, is that an orca?
No, the false killer whale is here. I'll pull a picture. These guys.
So the orca is the real killer whale, like Shaman.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a different species. Yeah, no, that's such an insane argument. Actually.
Yeah, you can't prove fossils had kids.
Yeah, look, the
good.
eye right here. Oh my gosh, there's neuroanatomy of cetacean sensory systems. Do we have?
Ooh, look at that. That's
right there. There you go. The eye is nowhere near the blowhole, and the nerves for it are nowhere near the blowhole. That is an insane claim. Yeah,
so that is hilarious. I'm so glad I brought this up.
Here, I'll put that in our live chat here, or our side chat. There you go.
Yeah.
Sorry, let me stop. Okay.
Yeah. So Rosina sent a super chat for $1.99. It says you can't prove the fossil had a baby. All right. You don't know that fossil had any kids. Well, we know that fossils are representative of an individual who is part of a population, and we know that individual had parents, and we know that that individual was from a species who must have reproduced enough for it to be a population level. If there was enough of them, that we would find a fossil, because fossilization is incredibly rare. So just because, and this is, I know it goes without saying, but his arguments are so stupid. He's arguing that you don't know that the fossil had any children, and you don't know that any children that were different. I don't know what he's defining different, because he thinks that I guess for evolution to happen, that you have to have we have to show a direct line, like for Lucy, for example, for it to count as evolution, you'd have to show a direct ancestry from Lucy. And Lucy's not an actual individual. It's like a name for the species, but Lucy to modern humans, it's ridiculous. You know what I mean?
Well, Lucy was one specimen of Australopithecus afarensis.
Yeah.
But in the case of, when you say, well, you can't prove a fossil out of a baby, well, that's true, but we don't have to, and that's not what the argument relies on. The odds that any fossil is a direct ancestor is very, very low. And so what the point of fossils is not to find direct ancestors, it is to find prima facie evidence that that a particular morphology is livable, so, or did exist in the past. So, for instance, if when creationists say, like, what is the good of, or what is the use of, like, half an eye or half a wing or something, and you find an animal that has a partial eye relative to our own, for instance,
Yeah.
you can say the point is not that this thing is our ancestor. The point is that you can go from point A to point B, and that it works at every step, right? So for what good is half a wing? Well, you can find in the fossil record theropods that have much smaller wings than, like, Archaeopteryx. They could have never used them to fly, but they didn't need to. They used them for other purposes, for insulation or for mate signaling. That's what the point of fossils is. That's what the point of finding fossils is, or finding other examples. It's not to show that this is our ancestor. It is to show that this thing could work, that this stage could exist. That's the point of fossils. It is never direct ancestry.
Okay, I'm gonna read this super chat, and then if you don't mind, I think I'll bring up the video.
Okay.
So Rosina sent a $50 super chat. Thank you, Rosina. I hope I'm not pronouncing the name wrong. One last super chat. I think I asked you last time to write out your name in the chat. One last super chat. Can you bring up to Kent that he's not seeing comments from Creationist Crybaby because so many users have been banned from making comments, which harms Kent's reach due to YouTube's algorithm? And for $50, I'll tell Kent that for verbatim. Thank you. That's very generous of you. So I appreciate that. All right, let me. Oh boy. It's always an experience watching I know you don't follow Kent as closely as I do, but the recent drama with Kent has been he lives in a gravel pit. That's his property was a gravel pit that he basically fixed up and turned into Dinosaur Adventureland, theme park. Dinosaur. There's no dinosaurs. There's no accurate fossil models there, anything scientific. But anyway, so there's a gravel pit that's adjacent to there, and there's a dirt road that goes in front of DAL called Pearl Lane, and there are big trucks that carry gravel to and from the gravel pit to construction sites where they lay it down for roads and people's houses and construction and stuff. And Kent was complaining that these trucks are driving on a dirt road, and they're kicking up a lot of dust, and the dust is getting blown over onto their cabins, and it's a problem, which that happens. It's called fugitive dust. But Kent has waited 8 years before saying anything about this. He's spent all this money, other people's money, donations, building cabins. At no point did he build any type of barricade, or there's lots of things you can do. Silt fences, there's fast growing plants you can lay down that can block this. There's, you can water the ground, you can put down there's things you can do basically that he's not done. He just wants the county to do it, which would cost up to between $500,000 to $1 million to pave a 1 mile stretch of road, because it's not just paving. You have to build the whole structure underneath the road. And instead of doing that, the county, because Kent wrote this insane letter There was like 11 pages of him just rambling about Dinosaur Adventureland. We've got this many people baptized and all this stuff. Like, what does that have to do with a road being paved? So what they did is they put up a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit sign to make the trucks go slower. So now Kent is saying he's threatening to sue the county for what law they broke. I don't know, but that anyway, it's
Yeah.
It is entertaining. I'll give him that. Okay.
Yeah,
The
I
Road
don't
Warrior.
follow him as closely as a bit of an understatement. I don't follow him at all.
That's good. That's good. I mean, I've sort of made that my thing. It's a whole genre on YouTube, honestly. Like, but that's good. You stay away. Watch my debate though. I still need to link that. I think. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm gonna play this, and then I will put that link in the private chat because I think I forgot to do that. All right.
And he keeps going. It's done. They say false. No made up stories. No long ago and far away. Just imagine, boys and girls. No. Where's the science? How did this happen? From Oceania.org. The 3 species of right whales are not the world's largest
Let me know if you want me to pause.
This distinction falls to the blue
Okay.
whale. But they do set a record in another regard.
Okay.
There are 90 species of whales.
Whoa.
The right whale is incredible in many ways. Here is a baleen whale.
Mm-hmm.
They say in coolantarctica.com, it says they have whale adaptations. Why can't they say design features? They always use that word.
I do actually have a question.
They're designed that way. Come on, you moron.
Sorry.
Does Kent not think anything is ever adapted?
He just thinks that animals adapt to their environment, but he just thinks that I don't know why that sounded wrong in my head. He thinks that that's just a variation within the kind. It's not adaptation of a species or causing speciation. It's adaptation, but they stay within the same kind.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mind-boggling. The whale has chromosomes that contain all the DNA code to make another baby whale.
That's true of all organisms.
A bunch of them.
Yeah.
It stores that information. Don't you marvel at the size of computer chips these days? How that little tiny chip can store so much information?
I avoid
That
technology.
is child's play compared to the chromosome. And you think it happened by chance? DNA, genes, and chromosomes from the
I mean, I don't know how he's quantifying complexity, but we're comparing
He's not.
the memory of human or like the information storage of a chromosome versus a CPU, which a CPU doesn't like contain information. That's like a hard drive that contains the memory of a computer's information. But I get the argument, but evolution isn't random chance. DNA replication errors are going to be random, but evolution is a deterministic process. So natural selection is going to select for mutations in a way that's not random chance. It's deterministic. I think there's a logic to it. Like Kent always brings up the example of, if you put a bunch of dogs in Alaska, the dogs with long hair, long fur would survive and the other ones wouldn't. Well, that's not random chance. That to me, that's totally logical.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's just a straw man, one of many.
No, Kent Hovind makes straw man say it ain't so.
Yeah, I'm afraid so. I like that. It's a good Weezer song, by the way. Oh, wait a minute. Wrong video.
The Cleveland Clinic. Your body's made of trillions of cells.
Whoa.
Each cell is a copy of a single cell that divided itself to make all the cells in your body.
Mm-hmm.
Your cells need instructions to create who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Your DNA, genes, and chromosomes work together to tell your body how to form and function.
Whoa.
DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid.
Well, that's a big word for Kent.
Is the material that exists in every cell of your body
Great minds.
that holds your genetic code. It makes up your body's instruction manual.
Mm-hmm.
DNA has a language it uses to write your instructional manual. See, the computer language only has 2 letters in it, 2 numbers, 0 and 1. Our English language has 26 letters. How many different words can you make?
And only
with
got to
26 letters?
17. No, just kidding.
Yeah, this is really not
Mm.
accurate because modern computers don't function off of pure binary. Like at the basis, at the most base level, yeah, it's going to be zeros and ones. But modern Windows is a 64-bit operating system. So it's just, again, like unless he's so out of date, he thinks computers still are like 8-bit, like Tandy, that he's streaming from like a ZX Spectrum or a Tandy or something like that. Oh, that's, I was in prison for 9 years and nothing changed. Nothing changes.
Letters. Whole bunch. Then you can arrange the words and make sentences, can't you? Then you make books. How many books we got in here? Bunch.
Mm-hmm.
And they all use the same code.
Whoa.
Well, the computer uses only 2-digit code, binary code. The DNA uses 4, which makes it thousands of times more complex.
How does that math work?
Yeah.
How does that math work?
This is the former math. Kent claims that he was a math teacher. Now, 4-bit code is thousands of times more complex than a 2-bit code, which is not even the right way to describe binary. But anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. That math ain't mathin'.
Like you it's not even accurate to like you know what? I'm not even going to get into this because it's irrelevant.
Information can be stored. Not only do the genes of the chromosome contain information, it wraps around and twists and folds over, and where they touch each other contains more information. It's a storage system that is mind-boggling. If you evolutionists would just stop and, are you allowed to think outside your box of evolution?
They touch each other. What does that
So
mean?
instead of the 8, 1, 0, and
Wait, does he think no one says that like DNA isn't complex? Because I don't know anyone who thinks that. I don't know.
Yeah, binary is a base 2 number system. It's not a 2. Anyway, thank you, Doc Dino, for the super chat for $2. It says, "Have a good night, you beautiful nerds." Well, I am, because I'm enjoying myself. Kent, he doesn't understand the concept of relativity, not in Einstein's relativity, but like things being relatively complex.
Mm-hmm.
And a single cell is complex, but it's relatively less complex than a multi-celled organism. Or the earliest single cell, the first replicating molecule, those first single-celled organisms are relatively less complex than modern single-celled organisms. But he just thinks everything is like, oh, well, one chromosome is more complex than the space shuttle. It's like, I don't know how you're quantifying that, Kent. Like,
Yeah,
there's no such thing as a simple cell. Go ahead. All right.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And he's never going to tell you, right? There's no metric. It's just a thing complex, therefore God. I mean, that is literally the extent of Kent's knowledge on any subject. So yeah, I had a debate with a guy named Finding Truth, who was a Muslim apologist, and he was very much not interested in finding truth. But his our debate was supposed to be on the Cameron explosion, and it very quickly turned into him asking me, like, is a trilobite more complex than this pre-Cameron animal? And I was like, I don't know. How are you using the term complex? Well, you don't think it's more complex? I don't know. How are you using that term? What do you mean? Can you define it for me? And he was like, it's ridiculous that you don't think it's more complex. I don't know what that word means. Can you please define it? It's just like round and round and round was the whole debate.
Yeah, I plan on doing the exact same thing, because Kent gets very upset when you ask him to define his terms, because he's intentionally vague. But yeah,
Sure.
DNA is not letters; it's chemistry. Yeah, the base pairs are represented by it's just the first letter of each, like guanine, cytosine. But he thinks that it's comparable to the alphabet, or that it's comparable to binary, because there's 4 characters in this, it's just he doesn't have an understanding past the most base level simplification. He oversimplifies I call it a gross oversimplification, to the point of just being completely inaccurate. Sometimes it just seems like an intentional misrepresentation.
No,
It's hard to tell. It's
Um,
it's hard to tell. Is he just wrong because he's dumb and uneducated,
Right.
or is it intentionally
Sure.
misrepresenting?
That's fair. And that is very fair. Yeah, it's hard to tell with Kent because he's, no one is ever going to get like through the mind fog that he has to like get at the shell underneath. But I do hate, whenever sources say that, like, DNA is a language. Like, it's really not. It is. They say it's a molecule, but if you want to say like DNA is a language or it's like a language, um, you have to say that, like, if DNA is a language, then you have to imagine that, like, a book in which you can't read 80% of it, and then of the more than that, like the 90% of it, you can't read like 90% of it, and then of the 10% you can read, um, if you're trying to read a sentence, like, parts of the words are not readable, so you have to like read around the parts that are unreadable. Because, like, when when you have a gene and you transcribe it into an mRNA sequence, and that mRNA sequence goes off, gets translated into an amino acid sequence, you don't just have like RNA polymerase that comes down and grabs on and just reads the sequence. That's that's what happens. But then what you have is you have processing. So you have processing of this transcript. So basically it produces this like raw transcript, and then a bunch of enzymes come in and cut it up, and they cut out segments that are called the introns, and then the exons, which are the segments that do actually generate the useful, I guess you might say, information. They generate the useful part of the gene that does get read for an amino acid sequence. Those get spliced together. That's not a language in any real sense. Like, that's nonsensical. We don't read sentences like that. Our words don't work like that. I think there is. I think you can say that, like, the DNA, or there is a genetic code. Yeah, there is. You have codons that correspond to particular amino acids. That's a code, sure, but DNA itself is not a code. You have codons that are the code, but not the DNA itself. So you're muted.
Yeah, and we have a nucleotide sequence, which is just a sequence of letters, which is, again, it's a simplification so we can understand it and write these out in papers and stuff. But it's not an actual code. The actual structure itself isn't a code. Okay, so a question from Dr. Dino says, couldn't you create a 4-base code using binary as a base? I'm not sure. I mean, you could convert binary numbers to base 4. You would just be grouping the binary numbers from right to left in groups of 2 bits and represent their values in base 4. You could do that for each number, but I don't think it would be a very good code. Anyway, getting back onto the topic of whales, because I skipped over a big chunk of the video, so we're actually going to get back onto the whales. I don't know how Kent got way off topic here, but all right.
Right whales. Sex involves 1-ton testicles and a 4-meter, that's about 13-foot long, penis. Each, they inject up to a gallon of sperm. Now you can do the math. 1 milliliter contains 20 million to 300 million sperm cells.
Why?
Milliliter.
Why do you care?
Right?
Why is this relevant?
So Kent will do this math, but he can't get the math right that says 2 times 2 is 4.
Apparently, yeah.
There are 3,785.4 milliliters in a gallon. So the whale is producing 75 billion on the low side to over 1 trillion sperm.
Cool.
Wait a minute. But you didn't say how many sperm cells are in each milliliter. You didn't quantify that. So where are you getting 75
It says each
billion?
milliliter contains from 20 million to 300 million.
Okay, you know what? You're right. I missed that. Okay, fair enough.
Each time he mates.
Cool.
Each sperm has half the code to make a baby whale. Randall, how many times have you computer code, like when we make copies of our DVDs? How many lines of code would that be? A lot.
You know what? You're not going to get me. You're not going
It
to do
takes
this.
a great, big, really intelligently,
what you're trying
highly
to do,
designed
Ken.
machine to make a copy of a computer program, or to
But
put a copy of
DNA is not a computer
anything.
program; it's a molecule.
Yeah, and I don't really think of DVDs as being computer codes. Like it's physical etching onto a disc. Like
computer generated. And you guys think that they're making a copy of a baby whale with trillions of times more complexity. And it happened by chance.
no,
Who taught you that? Get your money back.
No one did, because that's insane. You're making a copy. That's like saying that if I have 10 CDs, that's more complex than one CD. Like, in what sense? In the sense that there's just more CDs, but the actual information contained on each CD is the exact same, right?
I think
So,
I
like,
think he was saying that the whale baby is more complex than his DVDs. I think.
I mean,
I don't know.
I guess they're not technically the exact same, but at any rate, like it's really weird. The argument that he's trying to make here is very odd. It sounds like he's just saying it's more complex just because there are more of them, which I don't really know how. That's not what I would use as like a measure of complexity, but we're using Kent's definition that he hasn't provided. So
Yeah. Oh,
What's the evidence?
shout out to Stated Clearly. So this.
Hey, I love that guy.
Oh yes. So this, I've already planned it out, and I've asked permission from him. This video, what is the evidence for evolution? It's all about whale evolution. I am going to be using the transcript of that video, and I'm just going to be reading it verbatim for my intro in this debate because it's so well done that I figured, why bother writing my own intro when, And I asked John if he was okay with that. Of course, he said yes. And John is, like Jackson, has always, been willing to help me with any questions I have in preparing for these debates. He was really helpful in the Haeckel debate. He gave me scans of his book, Origins of Evolution, I think, which I couldn't find online. And, he gave me a bunch of, information regarding the embryos and it's funny how there's an overlap between embryology and the evidence for whale evolution, because you have the absorbed limb buds, you have the evidence from the nostrils on the dolphin embryo. So I think there's going to be some overlap between these two debates, which it gives me a chance to rag on Kent for the last debate, and because Jackson has not seen the debate I did the last time, so he's also not seen the outfit I was wearing in that debate because creation myths. Dr. Dan, who's also a brilliant evolutionary biologist, or teaches it, suggested that I should dress up like somebody from the 1860s in that debate.
Oh my gosh!
I was like, that's a great idea. So
you look pretty wild.
Yeah. Well, it was I enjoyed it. So
I like it. I do like the outfit.
Thank you.
My personal advice, of course you don't have to ignore me. My personal advice would be to ignore the whale hind limbs are vestigial as evidence. If like in the notes that I made, that's not even something I brought up. And the reason I didn't is like that has never been used as evidence for whales being related to hoof mammals. Like that was never a central pillar of the evidence for whales being hoof mammals, right? It's always been the genetics, the embryology, and then the fossils that we have, or the morphology, I guess you could say. You can compare the morphology because there are a number of characteristics that modern whales share with like Pakicetus and Ambulocetus and Indohyus that they don't share with any other like groups of organisms. So those are like the main lines of argumentation. You can totally skip, I think, the like, oh, they have vestigial hind limbs, therefore they're evolved or whatever. I think you can totally ignore that. You can use other vestigial examples like the teeth or the hind limbs in embryo. And that way you can like kind of circumvent Kent's argument in that, because he can go, oh, well, they use them for, for mating. You can say, well, I didn't make that argument, so I don't even care,
Yeah, I just already know that that's going to be like when Kent does his intro. He's going to go there basically, because that's his entire argument. It hinges on that specific thing.
Like, yes, I get that. I understand that. Like, that's what he's going to go with. But if
Right.
in your intro you lay out the genetics, morphology, embryology, and you never even mention that, and he goes, "Oh, well, this," you can come back in the rebuttal and say, "I didn't mention that. That's not an argument that has ever historically been used to justify whales as being artiodactyls, and I didn't use that argument here." So you're just, grasping at straws, basically.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll consider it.
Okay.
Because the stated clearly script, it goes into it's like 4 lines of evidence, and I believe one of them is regarding the hip bones. But yeah, I'll think about it, because I like that. That is very interesting. So yeah.
From stated clearly. What does stated clearly say? Fossils blur the line between 4-legged mammals and fully aquatic whales.
True.
No fossil is going to count as evidence for evolution. Do you ever stop and think about it? You find a fossil, you know it died. You don't know it's intermediate between anything.
Again,
all you know is it died. You couldn't prove it at any
Bless
children. You shortcut.
I mean, again, like that's not what fossil. That's not how fossils use it. That's literally never how fossils have been used as evidence for evolution. Never. You can go back to Darwin and look at what he wrote about transitional fossils, because he mentioned a number of them in the 6th edition of Origin of Species. He mentioned Archaeopteryx and Halotherium and Hipparium. For none of these, not one of them, did he say this is ancestral to modern organisms. He said these are organisms that are representative of the transition that logically would have occurred if evolution is true. These are representative of that. That's the point of fossils. It is that they are morphological intermediate, and they are stratigraphically intermediate. If you look at the fossil record, which again Kent thinks the geologic column doesn't exist, which is crazy, even by creationist standards, because if you look at other creationists like Andrew Snelling and like Todd Wood, they're like, yeah, of course the geologic column exists. What are you talking about? How big?
Sorry, I missed this super chat from Doc Dino. Sorry about that, but thank you.
How big was Basilosaurus's AIG?
Answers in Genesis?
I don't understand the question. Can you rephrase? I don't understand. Basilosaurus was, I think, like 40 feet long, something like that, wasn't it?
Sure, couldn't prove it had children that were different. No animal today can produce children that are changing into something else. Dogs make puppies every time. They get some dumber and dumber, but they get still a puppy, barely. Okay. Stated clearly. Let's see. Nearly aquatic whales, studying the idea that whales indeed evolved from land creatures. Now let's look at the 4th line of evidence, DNA.
Yeah, let's
so
skip ahead to the
clearly
4th line.
says the evidence for the evolution comes from the whale having a vestigial pelvis. Well, now this is one of the bones down there that they've got circled.
Well, what did he say about
museum.
genetics?
Well, I think as a token of my appreciation to you, I think if we could watch the Stated Clearly video in a second, because that's I want that's going to be what I'm using for my intro. So I think let me cue that up and just play a little bit more of this, because I think that'll be, because Kent is just, these are his arguments. They're really bad. He's gonna just repeat himself and get off topic. So I think it'd be more helpful to, because it's a great video that John did.
See? This bone, they call it the reduced hip structures of the whale. No, these are special bones that have special muscles that allow him to maneuver his 13-foot penis into position to make babies. They have to mate, underwater in the dark and can't talk and say, "Screw it over, honey." This has nothing whatsoever to do with walking on land.
Okay, this triggers me. Kent thinks whales can't communicate with each other.
which they can. Yeah.
Have you ever heard of whale songs, Kent? I mean, they can travel for I don't know how many miles.
Literally miles, yeah.
I'm Googling. I'm thinking it's like 10,000 miles. Really?
Jeez.
Well, that's researchers believe that some of these low frequency sounds can travel more than 10,000 miles in some levels of the ocean.
Okay.
I mean, apparently whales, they're saying up to 9,000 or 10,000 miles away. That's crazy.
And it's not just whales.
30 miles.
It's not just whales. Both whales and hippos make noises underwater to talk to each other. Like that's a shared characteristic
we see
of Whippomorpha. So yeah.
So thank you so much to the people in the Science Friends Twitter group, because somebody mentioned that I didn't even know this, that apparently whales lack all the olfactory structures to be able to smell like modern or like land mammals can. And I'm that's so great. I'm going to bring this up to Kent and say, like, why would God design the whale to not be able to smell things? I would just love to hear his answer to that question. So,
and they have the pseudogenes. So in their genome, it's not just like the broken, like, they're missing like that part of the brain or whatever. Yeah, it's also the genes are broken. Yeah, it's crazy.
It's like how snakes have the pseudogenes for legs, which I think is named the Sonic Hedgehog gene. I could be wrong on that one.
Stated Clearly presents What is the evidence for evolution?
Banger video.
The theory of biological evolution makes two very bold claims about living creatures.
I think we'll go through this, and then I think we'll wrap the stream up. If that sounds good to you. Thank you for taking the time, Jackson. I really appreciate it.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
First, all living things on Earth are related. They evolved from a common ancestor. Second, the evolution of living things is powered by natural processes, things which can be studied and understood. But is there really any evidence that these two claims are true? Yes. There are so many observable facts from so many different fields of study that the only way we can even begin to talk about them is to group them into categories or lines of evidence. To keep things simple, here we'll focus on evolution's first claim that all living things on Earth are related. We cannot tackle the entire tree of life at once. After all, there's an estimated 8.7 million species alive today. So instead, we'll focus most of our attention on one fairly small but fascinating branch of the evolutionary tree, cetaceans. This branch includes whales, dolphins, and porpoises. Biologists tell us that all these creatures are closely related, and that the entire group evolved from an ancient four-legged land mammal. Instead of taking their word for it, let's look at the facts. We'll start by looking at a few from the field of comparative anatomy, the study of differences and similarities between living things. Whales live in water, and from a distance, they sort of look like giant fish. A close inspection of their anatomy, however, tells us a very different story. Whales, just like land mammals but unlike fish, have placentas and give live birth. They feed milk to their young. They are warm-blooded, which is extremely rare for a fish. And whales do not have gills. Instead, just like us, they breathe air with two fully developed lungs. Whales don't seem to have noses like mammals do. Instead, they breathe through blowholes coming out the tops of their heads. Some whales have two blowholes which almost look like nostrils. But dolphins and porpoises only have one. Surprisingly, if you look at their skulls, you find that the blowhole splits into two nasal passages inside the head. Could it be that the blowhole is actually a highly modified mammal nose? It looks that way, but we'll need more evidence to be sure. Many whales have hair, just like land mammals. In this photograph, you can actually see the whiskers of this baby gray whale as he rests his chin on mama's back. Strangely, whales have arm, wrist, hand, and finger bones inside their front flippers. Here's a photo of these bones, the same bones that bats, hippos, and people have in their front appendages.
Mm-hmm.
And tiktaalik.
Mm-hmm.
And this is as opposed to sharks who have cartilage in their fins.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to me, this is a dead giveaway that about the evolution
Mm-hmm.
of whales, because why would they? Those are clearly finger bones. Why would a whale need finger bones when it doesn't have when it just has a flat fin? Also, manatees have fingernails. Sea cows.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Exactly.
We have a super chat from Regios. It says AIG is a bag of dicks. Drink trigger on Dappers is the reference from Doc's last super chat. Oh, okay, yeah. It's from Doc Dapper Dinos.
Oh, they were saying
Friend
how
stream.
big is Basilosaurus's? I got it.
I mean, I got it, but I didn't say anything.
I'm sorry. I'm slow. I didn't realize. My bad.
Yeah. So like, yeah, you are.
One bone, two bones,
Mm-hmm.
wrist, hand, and finger bones.
Mm-hmm. Morphological homology.
Modern whales do not have back legs, but they do have a strange pair of bones where the hind legs should be.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a picture of these bones from a bowhead whale. They almost look like shriveled hip, thigh, and shin bones. This one even has a ball and socket joint between the hip and thigh bone, just like the ball and socket joint in your own hip.
Mm-hmm.
Is this resemblance a mere coincidence, or are these
Okay.
real leg bones?
So I think the way that he's framing this is, I think that's fine. Pointing out that they have the morphological homologies. I think that's a fine way of doing that.
Okay.
Perhaps leftovers from the whale's evolutionary history. Before we draw any bold conclusions, let's see if a completely separate line of evidence will confirm our suspicions. Embryology is the study of how creatures develop before being born or hatching from an egg. Here we see a dolphin and a human embryo side by side at similar stages of development. Notice that they both have what look like arm buds and leg buds. In humans, the leg buds grow to become legs. In whales, they grow for a while but then stop, effectively fading away as the rest of the whale continues to grow.
I think we might have a yek in the chat.
It's okay.
Unless this person is being sarcastic. Sarcastic? I don't know why I'm saying sentences and words and they sound weird in my head. I must be going crazy.
Happens to the best of us.
Keep watching the stream, Vesuvian doppelganger. Or, what my question to you would be, what would you accept as evidence, or what would count as evidence for evolution?
These are all photographs of a common dolphin at different stages of growth. Notice that early on, we see two nostril grooves on the front of the face, just like you'd expect in a puppy or a human. As the dolphin continues to grow, the nostrils migrate to the top of the head and fuse together, becoming the dolphin's blowhole. So far, we have multiple facts from two independent lines of study, comparative anatomy and embryology, that are both telling us the same story. The ancestors of whales were once four-legged land creatures. Will the fossil record act as a third witness, confirming this idea? These are two species of extinct basilosaurid whales. These animals are known for multiple well-preserved skeletons, and they appear to have lived side by side, roughly 34 to 40 million years ago. In this photograph, we're looking down at the top of a basilosaurid skull. This is not a model or a cast. These are the actual bones which were pulled from the ground. Notice that the nasal opening is not on the top of the head like those of modern whales, and not at the end of the snout like those of land mammals. Instead, it's right in the middle. This is an intermediate species, exactly what evolution tells us.
This is what I was talking about. He's not saying that Dorodon is ancestral to modern whales. He is saying it represents an intermediate stage in their morphology that is what we would have expected to have occurred in the evolution of whales.
Well, Doc, you should consider that a compliment if I made that mistake.
us we should find. At the back end of a basilosaurid's body, there are small yet fully developed hips, legs, ankle, feet, and toe bones. These legs are far too small for walking on land, but they may have been useful while mating or for scratching away parasites and itchy skin. Evolutionary theory tells us that the further we go back in time, the harder it should be to distinguish whales from normal land mammals. Meet Myocetus. The hip bones of Myocetus seem sturdy enough to walk on land, but this animal is considered to be a whale for many reasons. Their skeletons have all been found among fossils of sea creatures, which tells us they lived in the ocean. Their short legs, combined with long, flat fingers and toes, suggest they were strong swimmers with webbed hands and feet. Here we see the bottom side of a Myocetus jaw and skull. Her teeth match those of the basilosaurid whales we saw earlier, and
That looks like it would have been a gnarly looking animal in its time.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Jeez.
unique structures of her middle ear bones match those of basilosaurid whales and modern whales.
Mm-hmm.
Myocetus appears to be a walking whale. Scientists have found the fossils of many ancient whale-like mammals and continue to find more. Together, these fossils blur the line between four-legged land mammals and fully aquatic modern whales, solidifying the idea that whales indeed evolved from land creatures. Now let's look at a fourth line of evidence, DNA. DNA molecules contain chemical codes which act like recipes for living things. Without ever looking at bones, embryos, or anatomy, researchers can compare the DNA code of different living creatures to find out who is most closely related to who. Whale DNA has been compared to all kinds of other animals, fish, sea lions, you name it. And so far, the closest genetic match is to the pudgy, water-loving hippopotamus. This does not mean that whales evolved from hippos, but if this genetic finding is correct, whales and hippos both evolved from a common ancestor that lived roughly 54 million years ago.
Mm-hmm.
At first, the link between whales and hippos surprised researchers because whales are mainly carnivores. They eat things like fish and small crustaceans. Hippos, on the other hand, are mostly vegetarian. A closer look, however, reveals that hippos and whales actually share many strange features, some of which may have come from their common ancestor. Ancient walking whales have specially shaped ankle bones found only in hippos and the close relatives of hippos. Just like whales, hippos are known to give birth and even nurse their young underwater. They both have multi-chambered stomachs, which is common for herbivores, but is almost unheard of for meat-eating mammals.
So I have a question. So hippos are not cetaceans?
Correct. Cetacea only refers to whales.
why,
Hippos are hippopotamidoidea or something like that.
Why are they not, what excludes them from being cetacean?
I mean, they're not cetaceans for the same reason we're not chimpanzees. We're a sister group.
But it's the closest related ancestor.
Closest living relative, yes.
Closest living relative.
Chimps are our closest living relatives.
Yeah, and hippos are not purely aquatic. Like, they go on land as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're semi-aquatic. Yeah, or amphibious. Mm-hmm.
Boy, don't mess with a hippo. Those things will kill you.
Yeah, they're I think the second deadliest animal, after mosquitoes? So,
well, I think strongest bite force, one of the strongest bite forces in the world. I saw a video where they were just feeding whole watermelons to a hippo, and he just crushed them,
Yeah.
They are both missing a coat of fur. And here's a fun fact. Whales and hippos are among the only mammals on Earth that have internal testicles. So there you have it. 4 independent lines of evidence all tell us the exact same story. Whales evolved from 4-legged land mammals.
Mm-hmm.
But the history of whales is not the only evolutionary history that we've been able to work out. We know from fossils, DNA, embryology, and many other lines of evidence that bird wings are actually modified arms and claws. Birds evolved from dinosaur-like ancestors.
Can I just say, this is such an iconic fossil. This has got to be my favorite image, fossil image of all time. This one, like, I love it. It's so cool.
Yeah. So that's the Solnhofen limestone from Germany. There are a lot of very extremely well preserved fossils that have been found in that deposit because it's a particular type of what's called a Lagerstätten. So Lagerstätten are these very well preserved sedimentary deposits containing fossils, and that is a particular type of Lagerstätten called a Plattenkalk. And Plattenkalks are basically when you have these extremely, extremely calm conditions. The exact opposite of a global flood. And so these organisms will like fall into a lagoon, for instance, and they'll just sink down at the bottom, and it's anoxic, so there's like no bacteria eating on them or whatever, and they get preserved just like pristinely, absolutely beautifully. And so it's there's another fossil from that deposit. It's called Mesolimulus, and it's shows basically this horseshoe crab relative, sank down to the bottom of this lagoon, and where it was anoxic, so it kind of ran around for a little while, tried to escape, and then it died. So it left what's called a morticnia, because ichnofossils are trace fossils that are like tracks, and then mort means death or refers to death. So morticnia means you died in your tracks. And so it's really, really beautiful fossil. I'll type it in the side chat.
Yeah.
We can also clearly see that bat wings evolved from five-fingered hands, very similar to those of monkeys and shrews.
Mm-hmm.
We've found that humans share a fairly recent common ancestor with chimpanzees, that mammals evolved from reptile-like creatures, those reptile-like creatures evolved from amphibian-like creatures, those amphibian-like creatures evolved from fish-like creatures, and fish.
Dude, shout out to Tiktaalik.
Shout out to Tiktaalik. True.
If you go back far enough, share a common ancestor with segmented worms. So to sum things up, thousands of observable facts from completely independent fields of study have come together to tell us the exact same story. All living things on Earth are related.
Mm-hmm.
I'm John Perry, and that's a basic overview of the evidence for evolution, stated clearly.
Wow.
Yeah,
good video. I have to say, great video, not just because the information is great, but what fantastic production quality,
Absolutely. Yeah, true. He makes wonderful videos.
Yeah, and, John has he's got a big following on YouTube, and yet he is somebody who, anytime I've messaged him on Twitter, he always gets back to me quickly. He always takes the time to, because he really cares about educating people about this stuff. And I just, I've had interactions with some bigger YouTube channels that have not been as, let's say, pleasant. It's not always, that nice working with bigger channels sometimes. I'm not going to name names, but anyway, Jackson, thank you so much for taking the time. I think this was literally very educational for me. And just, I hope you had fun, because I certainly did.
I hope that the notes and the PowerPoint that I made serve you well in your debate. So
yeah. Alrighty. Well, I think we're gonna call it, because it's pretty late. It's past my bedtime. Thank you so much to the people who sent super chats. I can't believe the generosity of my community is crazy. So just, you guys know the drill. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'm creeping up on 9,000 subscribers. So if you sub, please, I really want to reach that goal by the end of the year. Check out my Patreon page. I have channel memberships, and you can send super chats and super thanks. But but just watching the videos and liking, commenting supports the channel. So don't feel obligated to spend money. Go and sign up for Stated Clearly's Patreon. Don't sign up for mine. His is like, give him your money. All right, I'll talk to you guys later and see you in the next stream. Bye bye.